Good morning, all. Suburban Sentinel here, coming to you once again from deep inside the Arabian Peninsula. And this is the second installment of our quick video series on civil asset forfeiture. For those of you just joining us, civil asset forfeiture is a legal process by which certain federal, state, and/or local agencies can relieve you of some of your money or other property without notice, without hearing, without any criminal charges. Basically, they can just take your stuff on suspicion that your stuff has been used in the commission of a felony. And I will leave the link to the first video in the description box below. Now, there is a lot of information, videos, and in print in the public domain about the various abuses of the federal, state, and local asset forfeiture laws. But there is also a dearth of information about what we can do to minimize the risk of us having our property wrongfully taken by a government agency. So the focus of this video will be avoidance and mitigation of any possible civil asset forfeiture actions against us. The Porcupine Theory. Let's all be porcupines. What on earth does that mean? Well, if you are an American and you own any type of property of significant value, you are a potential target for a civil asset forfeiture action. In the animal kingdom, the lowly porcupine is neither fast enough to outrun nor powerful enough to take on larger predators. So, to a predator, a porcupine might make a very tasty meal, but for its sharp quills. And the porcupine's natural strategy is that it makes the cost of obtaining that tasty meal in the form of pain too great for the predator to bother. As ordinary citizens, we can neither outrun nor most of us overpower government agencies. But, like the porcupine, we can make the cost of obtaining that which the government wants from us unacceptably high. So let's take a look at what we as ordinary Americans can use as our quills. I have 4 general policies. First, I try not to be a target, and that is avoid anything that looks inherently suspicious. Try not to stand out or garner any undue attention. Second thing, know your rights. It is extremely important to know your rights, otherwise you will not be able to effectively enforce them. And along the same lines, enforce your rights to the maximum extent possible. Finally, you want to show, emphasis on the word show, not tell, the authorities that any civil forfeiture action against you will be met with absolute maximum resistance. You will cause as much pain to the officers and their respective agencies as humanly possible. In other words, with respect to the forfeiture action, the juice isn't going to be worth the squeeze. So let's get into the details of how we should proceed or how we should act in order to minimize our chances of being subjected to a civil asset forfeiture. And we will do it in the context of the manners in which we are most likely to face such an action. Motor vehicle stops are one of the most popular ways that law enforcement has of initiating civil asset forfeitures. And by the way, this also applies even if you are not using a motor vehicle, if you're just a pedestrian out in public. So again, The first general policy is try not to be suspicious or stand out. And this is basically common sense. And I'll give you a little story. A while ago, one of my friends called me and said he was out the night before and he was hassled by the police. Now, by way of background, he's a very successful guy. He grew up in the projects in a pretty tough city, and he made out pretty well. He's an older guy and fairly wealthy. And he was telling me that the night before he could not sleep, so he decided to go visit his old neighborhood to remind himself of how far he had come. So he, went middle of the night, got in his car and went to his old hood. And he was pulled over by the police. Now, why was he pulled over? He looked extremely suspicious. Here's an old white guy in the hood driving his $100,000 Mercedes in the middle of the night. Tell me that doesn't seem a little suspicious. Now, nothing happened to him, but he wasn't using a lot of common sense on many levels, not just for the purposes of civil asset forfeiture. Now, he kept saying to me, but I'm from there. It's, well, no, you're not from there anymore. You were from there. Use your head. Along those same lines, be mindful of the type of car you're driving and the location you happen to be driving it. Kind of reminds me of that movie from years ago, My Cousin Vinny, where the lawyer from New York goes to rescue his younger cousin from rural Alabama, and he drives down there with the blinged out girlfriend in the Cadillac with New York plates, and he gets into all kinds of situations. In those instances where I travel far from my home turf, I almost always rent a car for a number of reasons. First of all, if something happens to the car, God forbid the car is stolen or is in an accident, and it's a rental, it does not interrupt my trip. I simply fill out the appropriate paperwork, get another rental car, and I'm back on my way. Second thing is, having a rental car is a very good deterrent to a civil asset forfeiture. First, rental cars are kind of plain Jane, not very valuable, not very desirable. And second, if the police department decides that the car is under suspicion of being used in a felony, they will have to fight with either Hertz or Avis's lawyers, who will be happy to take them on in court. Again, this is one situation where an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. No agency in their right mind is going to want to tangle with a bunch of corporate lawyers to get an undesirable automobile. Also, don't carry a lot of cash or other valuables either in your vehicle or on your person unless it's unavoidable. Now, you hear these stories from time to time. For example, the poor SOB, he was pulled over on the highway. He was driving out of state, headed to a restaurant equipment auction in order to buy equipment for his struggling restaurant, and he had, I don't remember exactly, $9,000 or $10,000 in cash on him. And the police decided that they highly suspected this was drug money, and they took it from him. And it took him a very long time, and I don't think he even got it all back. I think he settled with the agency and got half of it back or something like that. But you hear these types of abuse cases all the time. Also, if pulled over for a traffic stop or a checkpoint, anything of that nature, record all of your interactions with the police. And I would use at least 2 recording sources, one of which the police would know about. I believe all the smartphones these days you can record with. Make sure they know they're being recorded. And I would also use a second device, one of those surreptitious spy pen things that's actually a voice recorder that looks like an ordinary fountain pen, something of that nature. Another policy in dealing with the police, and this applies to all interactions with police, not just traffic stops, is never ever answer any questions. You do not volunteer any information. You simply advise them that you will not answer questions without the assistance of counsel. Simply follow all reasonable instructions. If you are pulled over in a traffic stop and they ask you for your license, registration, and insurance, simply hand it to them. If they ask you any questions, just again give them the standard response. I refuse to answer any questions without the advice and assistance of counsel, and just keep asking them, am I being detained? Am I free to go? Am I being detained? Am I free to go? Also, never ever give the police consent to search your person, your vehicle, your residence, or your place of business. And that means no express consent. Even if they ask, you tell them, I do not consent to searches. And do not give them implied consent either. If they try to just walk into your home or open the door to your vehicle, tell them, I do not consent to this search. You are not free to look around. Get out. Do not be afraid of the typical police responses. They may ask you, what are you hiding? In that case, again, you say, I refuse to answer any questions without the advice and assistance of counsel. Am I being detained? Am I free to go? Assuming it's either a personal or a motor vehicle stop. Another common tactic is they say, well, if you will not give us consent to search, you're going to have to wait here while we get a warrant. And in that case, I would say, fine, do what you have to do. Go get a warrant, but I am not giving you consent to search. Am I being detained? Am I free to go? In the event that the police say they have a warrant, demand to see it. There have been several cases in which the police have lied about having a warrant, and they wave a piece of paper that is either nothing or a cocktail receipt or something else that is not in fact a valid search warrant. So demand to see the paperwork. Again, in a motor vehicle stop, make sure you have all of the relevant information. Again, record it, but also make a note of the time you were stopped, the names and badge numbers of every officer you interacted with during the stop. Try to get the patrol car number and the license plate numbers of each patrol car if possible, along with the names and license plate numbers of any witnesses. Make sure the police see you gathering all this information whenever possible, and if you do have any interactions, verbal interactions that is, with the officers, make sure you include the word either attorney or lawyer as frequently as possible. Bank accounts. The IRS and even some agencies at the state level have gotten very good at accusing your money of being involved in felony criminal activity. In other words, the federal government or the state government comes in and says, we think you are pushing drugs or something else, and we have all this money in your account, and guess what? It's frozen with no notice or hearing. Recently, I read about one case, a woman who owned a small restaurant, and the IRS seized all of her bank accounts, saying that she must have been involved in some type of criminal activity because she was structuring her deposits such that deposits every week were just under $10,000. So of course that meant she was some sort of criminal, and her accountant came in and testified that her restaurant grossed somewhere between $9,000 and $10,000 a week every week for years on end, and it turned into a big to-do. I'm not exactly sure how that case turned out. It may even still be pending, but this is the type of silliness that's happening in America today. Unfortunately, bank account seizures are a problem where there's not a whole lot we as individuals can do about it. All I can say is don't keep all of your money in a bank. A few weeks ago, I made a video. I believe the title of it was "Your Money's Not Safe." And for a variety of reasons, I would not keep money in an FDI insured bank anymore unless it was absolutely necessary just to pay bills. Now, I am not an economics guru or a financial advisor, so I certainly wouldn't presume to tell you how to invest or hold your wealth and assets. However, I do think it is important to keep a substantial amount of cash on hand in the event that we have another financial crisis like we did in 2008, or in the event your assets are somehow seized by the government incident to either a bank bail-in, which I believe there is a risk of that happening, or some type of civil asset forfeiture action. Where to keep the cash? Well, that's really up to the individual, whether you're going to stuff it in a mattress or keep it in a safe in the closet or put it in a safe deposit box in a financial institution. I really don't have a good answer for that. I struggle with that all the time. I will say, however, that keeping it in a bank account, a regular FDIC insured account, is very risky at this point in time. Real property. Yes, government agencies can and do seize homes and other forms of real property under civil asset forfeiture law. Two quick stories. One, the city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania is currently under investigation because over the last 10 years or so, the city has seized upwards of 1,000 real properties. These are private homes almost exclusively, saying that the properties were being used in felony criminal activity. Needless to say, many of these claims are highly suspect. In another very well publicized case, there was an older couple, I believe this was out of Tewksbury, Massachusetts, and I don't know if it was the federal government or the Commonwealth of Massachusetts itself or a combination, but this old couple had a motel. I believe they still have it at this point, and they inherited the motel from their family. Motel's been around for many decades, and the government is saying that this old couple is using the hotel for criminal activity. From what I've read, the crux of the evidence is that over the last 20 years or so, a handful of the hotel's guests have been either arrested and or convicted of felony drug use or drug trafficking. Now, that evidence on its face sounds very flimsy. I do not believe that hotels and motels are under a duty to do a background check for every person that checks into the establishment. What to do about the possibility of a civil asset forfeiture action on your home or other real property? Well, that is a very tough one. Quite honestly, I'm not exactly sure how to prevent it. Very, very difficult problem. All I can say is do not let a known felon or someone who is likely to commit a felony to stay under your roof. And I'm exploring actually doing a couple of things if my wife and I return to the United States in the near future and we do buy a property, and that is a big if because I'm not convinced that we would or should, whether to encumber that property with a mortgage, even though we'd be more inclined to pay cash, because an encumbered property or a property with mortgage on it would be much more difficult and tricky to seize. Other than that, I really have no other idea what to do about real property. If anybody has any suggestions about civil asset forfeitures and real estate, I would certainly love to hear them. Well, this video has dragged on entirely too long. I think that's about all I have to say about civil asset forfeitures for the moment. Hopefully, we can get civil asset forfeiture reform done, along with a myriad of other problems confronting our country. So, thanks for watching. This is the Suburban Sentinel. Please thumbs up and subscribe if you like what you see. Questions, enlightening comments, and differing opinions are always welcome. Be safe and prep, everybody. Things are a-changing.